So after Act 3 is the goal for the next project is David Crowley is the central character of it, and I you mentioned that you were planning to try and get the case reopened for the I guess to complete your mission with this next project, I assume.
Yeah, after Act 3 is completed, I would say jump right back onto the Crowley case, but I'm always on the Crowley case. But yeah, I'm trying to get the case reopened. And so I'm right now it's just planting the seeds to connect me with certain people in law enforcement, attorneys, lawyers, criminologists, private investigators, you name it, anybody that could help me and wants to take a look at the overwhelming anomalies regarding this case, uh, this brutal murder that occurred in 2014, 2015 of this family. And for your audience that may be unaware, David Crowley, who is an independent filmmaker, had been working on a narrative feature called Gray State. This was in 2012, which was a trailer, and it was released in August of 2012, and it appears to follow the breakdown of American society, showing scenes of militarized police force, um, Americans being rounded up and put into FEMA camps, FEMA concentration camps, the utilization of RFID chips being implanted into humans, masks, vaccines, QE4, martial law. Basically, what all of these Illuminati game cards have been telling us all of these years.
And this is 9 years ago.
Well, the bodies were found 9 years ago. The bodies were found on January 17th, 2015. And within 24 hours, the Apple Valley Police Department claimed that David killed his 5-year-old daughter, his wife, Kamel, and killed himself. And yes, it's labeled as a homicide-suicide, which is why I'm trying to get this case reopened. Because some of the anomalies that I'm about to share with you right now, I want your audience to become fully aware of this, because I want the support of truth seekers, which is essentially your audience.
What's the official
what's the official what?
explanation for the suicide?
Oh, that this conspiracy project, this Gray State project that he'd been working on, it got the best of him, and so he went crazy. This veteran, this loving father and husband, who's been back from the war, who's been back for a few years. They claim he had PTSD and that he was suffering in a downward spiral of conspiracies.
It's convenient.
Yeah, it's
the other thing is he was on the verge
not original, and he was
on the verge of doing
exactly. He had sold this project. He was in because the bodies were found during the holidays. I suspect David was looking to move out to Hollywood, because he had sold his project to the Michaels Entertainment Group and had an active deal with them. So he was coming to LA a couple times in 2014. So this man definitely had plans for his future. We see that through several people who shared their emails that we had submitted and received in the FOIA request. We see these emails of people showing correspondence with David, just a few days before he was last heard from, talking about interviews, talking about plans he had for after the holiday break, plans for Gray State, and plans to move with his family to Los Angeles. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Whatever you guys want to see, we can see. But if you want to see us, I'll leave the screen like this. So let's go with the first question. It says, "Why isn't David's blood or tissue found on any of the bullets?" The police say the lone bullet, item 57, that killed David was found a whole month after the bodies were found. The police initially left with 6 casings and 4 bullet fragments, and they didn't find the supposed magic bullet that killed David until a month later. And this bullet was never discovered by the investigators. It was they learned of this after it was brought to their attention during a phone interview between police detective and Chris Klein, along with a gentleman named Mason Hendricks, who were in the Crowley house on the 19th of January. And they opened up the attic crawl space, and they were aware of not only where the bullet was, but they were aware of the fact that the police missed this bullet. Now, how would they even know that the police missed this bullet? And furthermore, why didn't they tell the police about this bullet when they discovered it on the 19th of January? But instead, they don't discover it until a month later after that.
Did he shoot himself? They're saying, did he shoot himself through the head or the heart or what?
The head. They don't know the entry. We'll look at that here in the autopsy. Yeah, indeterminate. The pathway, trajectory, indeterminate. The entrance, indeterminate. We're going to get to this portion here in just a moment. When the police department does arrive for the first time, you can see the bullet hole in the ceiling. But like I said, there's no mention of it. They never discover it, and they never collect that bullet fragment. But we know that Mason Hendricks and some other people in David's life were not only inside of his house, we're not sure how they got inside, but they were inside the attic as well. They claimed they wanted to know why David killed himself. So that's question number 1. Question 2, why was the dog feces never tested if police assumed the dog ate specific parts of the 3 bodies? Let me elaborate. David's head and right hand are missing from the crime scene. David is right-handed. Both of the hands belonging to his wife, Kamel, and the entire right arm, which was removed from the socket, of his 5-year-old daughter, Rania, are also missing. And this was ascribed to apparent dog scavenging. And we can see that here in his autopsy report. His head is missing. David's head is missing.
The one with the bullet hole?
What do you mean?
Because he shot himself through the head.
He shot himself through the... Well, they claim he shot himself through his head, and yet his
The
hand...
head that's missing.
His head is missing, and his hand is missing. And, you know, when we submitted and received all of these documents from the FOIA requests, we did not receive any photos of the bodies. Someone named Tony Klein submitted his own FOIA request, and in there were 2 photos of the bodies. I don't see how that's helpful right now to showcase those. What you'll be looking at in this photo is a body with no head. And so one of the first orders of business for me, at least, I want to see, because there was a knife found at the crime scene. And as I mentioned, his wife, who's laying, well, you can't see me, so where's
Yeah,
this
we can.
finger? Yeah, okay. His wife is laying, both of her hands are missing, and she's lying under her arms when the police arrive. Furthermore, their daughter it's almost like the parts that were not exposed,
right,
were the parts of flesh that are missing. And we're talking about 2 adult female hands, 1 adult male hand, 2 heads, an entire right arm from the socket. of
And
little baby Rania. And this was, like I said, this was determined within 24 hours.
do dogs typically, when they get hungry, can they eat bone and skulls? Is that what
I
they're
s-
assuming?
has it happened in the past? Yes, and they are assuming that, but I would like
Or
to
maybe
say
buried
that
them or something?
this is a beagle. Here's a picture of
It's
the
a beagle.
dog. This is the dog Paleo that was blamed for all of the missing body parts, even though there are 2 bags of dog food in the kitchen.
That's what I was gonna ask you next. Was there any dog food left?
There was dog food in the
Oh,
kitchen. Not
man.
sure what that's all about. What I find to be most disturbing is that there are no blood prints. In fact, the blood found at the crime scene is it's very minimal. And besides, there's no blood of David found at the crime scene other than on the inside of the magazine. On the inside of his Springfield XD, on the inside of that magazine is David's blood. But on the bullet that they found a month later that supposedly killed David, none of David's blood or tissue is found there. And these are 40 caliber hollow point bullets. So for 3 bodies, and this area of the house is very suspect to me. I'm not going to get into it so much, but like you can see there's this kind of dragging motion, but yet the
Hmm.
blood is coming, this blood here and that's on this wall here is coming out this way. But this
Yeah.
blood is coming this way. And so what's interesting is that the blood exists here. All the bodies are right here. Well, this is the living room. This is after they put the bodies in the bags. So right here is where Kamel is lying, and Rania is tucked between her legs. David is sprawled out this way with his arms stretched out. It looks very much like the crucifixion pose.
Hmm.
But what's very alarming to me is the lack of blood. Not only the lack of David's blood, but just the lack of blood at the crime scene. Really, what we have is this. This is what
Wow.
we have for 2 adults and 1 child.
Do they have an excuse for that? Like, the bodies were at a stage of, I guess, what are they what do you call bodies when they've been dead for 2 weeks? Where they're at a certain point of being
Autolysis,
dead?
marked autolysis, mummification, and they were in a state of mummification. I will show this. It's one of the least gruesome pictures, but it will show you the mummification process that started in David, who is marked, who is listed in his autopsy as marked autolysis. Some people believe David died first, where Kamel and Rania is listed as I believe it's simply autolysis and not marked autolysis. But when they're saying marked, they are talking about his liver and his kidneys. So what we'd have to determine with somebody in that field to help us determine if David died first or if David died later. But I think the consensus within the 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 Crowley community, because like I said, there's investigators, citizen investigators that have been working on this since the moment that this happened, but you know, there hasn't been any new leads or new information, and so I'm kind of coming in, having been on this case for 5 years, and I'm just, like I said, while I'm working on Act 3, I want to do these interviews and get people familiar with what I'm doing and where I'm taking this case. But this is David's left hand. Remember, the gun is found about right here on his left side. David's right-handed. David's right hand is missing. And this is the state, you can see his hand is in a
Yeah.
advanced state of decomp.
Jeez.
But what I really wanted to showcase the condition the bodies were left in, and the very bizarre crime scene around the bodies. But you can see David is making this, his index finger and his thumb are making like a circle, or they're making contact, which is something I've never seen before. And I would love to find a reason for this, but it almost looks like he was holding something.
Huh.
And the gun, like I said, is right here where this cursor is. It's lying on his left side.
And the other fingers aren't in the curled natural position that you would be at if you weren't tensing at all. You notice that they're
Right.
kinda it's very odd.
Even just the crime scene alone. Here we have Allah Akbar written on the wall here. This is Kamel's blood, and uh, none of David's DNA or his fingerprints were found in this blood mixture. And you can see, like, this is David's foot down here, and this is Kamel. And yes, these photos, we only have 2 of them that were leaked from Tony Floyd. I don't want to say leaked because they were given to him within the FOIA request, so they're not leaked. But I don't think they meant to include them. This is why I want to see these photos, because, like I said, there's a knife found at the crime scene, and we have 2 missing heads, 3 missing hands, and an entire missing right arm that they said the beagle ate. There's no evidence of it because they didn't test the dog feces, nor do we see any evidence of it because there's no paw prints to be found anywhere. And so with this particular sequence with Alu Akbar written in his wife's blood, we don't see any blood
Hmm.
from her body to the wall. Like, if they said David dipped his hand in her blood, well, we would see a trail, you
Hmm.
know, as he hopped up on the couch and hopped up here to climb up here and write these words. We don't see a trail at all. We
Like they
also
had a
we don't see a bowl either. Where's
yeah.
the bowl to collect his wife's blood? In fact, where's all the freaking blood?
I know.
Look at this crime scene. When they I didn't set out a picture. I don't think I collected. I have photos of when they take the they
Oh,
pull back this rug, this area rug. There's not a lick of blood under
really?
it.
Wow.
So F, you know, like, well, no, the gun's found. I don't know. Because this is after the cleaning crew. This blanket was here on the ground. This is way later. The bodies have been removed. The gun's been put over here on the counter. Um, I just wanted to give you this very strange. The hair. There's hair that it looks. We still don't know, based on all these reports that we have, which is hundreds of pages. We don't know whose hair this is. It looks like it was ripped out from someone's skull. When we look at that photo of that from the Tony Floyd's FOIA request, it does appear that Rania has pieces of hair missing from her scalp. But then again, we know that David's head and Kamal's head is missing. So where does all this hair that's scattered around the bodies? Here are the bodies. And the tuft, there's this like cotton tuft that's scattered around as well. Let's find a photo. Let me just. Okay, so this is Kamel, I believe. And David's up here. But the way that, if you look at the crime scene and you look how, like, here's the knife. Here's the knife, right? And when we look
Mhm.
at David's autopsy and they talk about the fact that his right hand is missing, but they accredited it to animal scavenging, but then they say that it's smooth, that the cut is smooth. And so that's found here. Y'all can pause this and smooth ends. This is why I want to see these photos.
Wow.
I don't think it was ever determined as to whose set of teeth this perfect set of teeth just lying there. The way the bones are scattered, like, look at this just for a second. We have, um, I cannot remember if this was ever tested or determined whose scalp this is, but it's under the blue blanket. And the reason why I bring that up is because we're going to see that David's leg, one of David's feet, is under Kamel's cardigan. And then we're going to see another part of David that's under the blue blanket. And the police even documented this in the report. But then it's like, if David killed his wife and his daughter and then killed himself, how is it possible that any part of them is on top of him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the way they it's just such a sloppy crime scene. And so you have
Yes.
this tufting scattered all around the bodies, and you have this hair along with the knife and scalp pieces and a freaking mandible. And it's just this right here, what we're looking at is a scarf that David had.
They didn't really expect this to be looked into, I guess. That's the only explanation. Whoever was responsible for this, it's the only explanation I could think of for that.
Or they did,
Sloppiest.
but sloppy. It's almost like overkill or over. The way it's staged, it's like it's
Sending a
overdone.
message.
It's confusing, but I think it's possible that it's meant to be confusing.
Right.
So let's go to question 3. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit, but why do police believe dog scavenging was the result of missing body parts? Kamel was found lying face down with her arms under her torso, where Rania was found tucked between her mother's legs, lying more so on her right side, where the arm is missing. In that photo, you could see she's kind of facing out this way towards the kitchen island, but her entire left arm is intact.
The
So how
exposed.
is it possible that the dog ate the body parts that were not exposed? And furthermore, like I said, the knife was found at the crime scene, and the autopsies state the cuts are smooth, and there's the knife.
Yeah.
So police found no latent fingerprints on the blood wall, but they assumed that David wrote Allahu Akbar in his wife's blood. Why are David's fingerprints, touch DNA, or any DNA found on the blood wall? I missed this part. Why was the cause of the daughter's broken third rib never determined? It's there in the autopsy, but they never give a reason for it. And we'll see a lot of that in the police reports and the autopsy. These things that are kind of brought up, but then the conclusion, it always kind of goes back to the dog. The dog's to blame for this. David and the dog Paleo are to blame for this entire thing. Everything is pretty much addressed here. Or when we look at, we look at any of their autopsies, some of these things are addressed. Like even some of this hair is pubic hair.
Wow.
And so there are things that were addressed, but then there are some things that it's just like, how did y'all come up with this? How did you guys determine this? Especially with low velocity blood splatter on the wall, like for 3 bodies, it's 6 bullet casings. We have one right here. This sequence, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't. The next question: why was the blood stain on the living room recliner chair never tested? This blood stain proves one of the 3 bodies were moved at some point. Now, this is the recliner I'm talking about. This is one of the pools, the large pools of blood that we see on this recliner, but this is not explicitly what I'm talking about when I bring this up in this question, because it's the foot of this lazy boy that is soaked in blood. This is the area of the recliner I'm talking about.
Right.
This area here has all the blood, and it's pooled there. Here's Kamel lying diagonal. And oh yeah, you could. This is why who I was talking to the PI yesterday and was able to. You'll notice there's a huge gash in her leg right here. David also has a huge gash in his leg. David is lying right here. Okay. And Rania, you could see a little bit of her dress right there. She's lying right here. But the bulk of the blood is right there at the foot of this recliner. What we were just seeing here on the recliner is the arm, the
Right.
left arm of the recliner. Other than that, we've got blood on the wall here. We got a little blood spatter. We have footprints here that they claim are David's, even though, in my opinion, they're way too small to be David's, but they never tested. They determined that it was David's feet because David was the only one barefoot, but they never tested his feet. They never said, yes, David has blood on his feet. We tested this blood. It is, I mean, it's Kamel's blood. Like I said, I believe there's two bullet fragments or one. Don't quote me on that, but we're not seeing anything of Rania there at the crime scene, but maybe a bullet fragment or two. The rest of the blood is Kamel's. David is nowhere to be found other than on the inside of the magazine. When you look at the kitchen, like the area going on in the kitchen, it looks like these people were ambushed on Christmas night. It looks like they're all in the kitchen or the living room, at least, like making food or preparing some type of meal. David's in the kitchen at the kitchen island. That's what it looks like to me.
Does it look like to you that they could possibly have been transported after they were?
Yes, it's possible that they didn't die or that they were split up. Though there could be logical explanations as to where the blood went. If they put some type of hood or something over their heads, I think we kind of need to determine why the heads were removed. And were the heads removed, was there some type of mark or some indication of a struggle? You know what I mean? Were the heads removed to be part of this gruesome experience, or were the heads removed because somebody hated this family and wanted them dead and wanted something from them? Or were the heads removed because there was a struggle? Why is Ranya's head intact, but Kamel's and David are
Maybe
not?
they wanted her to watch.
I mean, we can speculate that, but what type of equipment or what gives us all these bone fragments, which are very clean, but like I said, they're scattered around the house in a way? How does this bone fragment get under this blue blanket? But then there's no trajectory. Like we should see a mist or a spritz or a spray of the blood. We don't see that anywhere here. There was supposedly, if you look at where the bodies are found, the way they're killed, how does something like this make sense? With this rocking chair blocking this, looks like somebody who's dragged into the living room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the only sequence where it's like, wait, it looks like this is like how the Apple Valley Police Department within 24 hours said that this was a homicide suicide. It's beyond me, bro. Like, are they involved? On one hand, it looks like their investigation is solid, but why are they so determinate? Why are they so determined to say that not only did he do it, but then we've tried to get them to look at some of these questions and anomalies that we've brought to them. They won't hear it. So are they just natural stubborn asses, or are they hiding something?
Yeah.
It only takes one person in the department to hide something. The rest, it's a chain of command. So we just covered that. And we have addressed that. Why is David's blood on the magazine of the murder weapon, but not on the murder weapon itself? Why is the only
Inside the
conclusive
magazine, not on it,
inside the
right?
magazine, right? Why is the only conclusive fingerprint tying David to the crime scene found on his notepad, but not on the gun, the blood wall, or the laptop in the kitchen? This is the notepad, and you'll see that there is a little bit of Kamel's blood, and they say that this is from his left palm, even though David's right-handed. What's funny, I was speaking with Jim Fetzer yesterday when they flipped the page. I don't on this page here, it says like talks about all these different false flags, and Sandy Hook was jotted down on that notepad. But this is what basically ties David to all of this was this right here. This is the infamous notepad. And if your audience is wondering what the rise is, David was working on what I would call a featurette or a documentary, kind of not about the Gray State project itself, but more about its themes. And so there was a documentary called Gray State: The Rise that David decided to release to the public for free. But David never got to release Gray State: The Rise. But yet, I believe it was 3 days. I want to say it was the 20th. Is either the 20th or the 23rd of January, just a few days after the bodies were found. A rough cut of The Rise, of Gray State: The Rise, was released on YouTube. In fact, there were a lot of anomalies that occurred during this time as far as internet activity or computer activity. And so
Was that anonymous, or was there? Do we know who released it?
that's actually what I'm determining now. I'm using the Wayback Machine. I know of the origins of where it came from, and I know some of who shut it down. There was and once people start familiarizing themselves with the names of the people involved in this investigation, there's some people who shut this video down, some of my persons of interest. But since we're talking about computer activity, let's talk about this right here. Police found David's laptop open, and it was connected to a Bluetooth speaker. Now, of course, the Tom Lydon and the news, I believe it was Care 11 of Minnesota, they like to say that David had a playlist that was on a loop that was playing while he murdered his family. Well, if you have the photos, you can go through and you can listen to this entire soundtrack. And first of all, I would like to tell you that this is not a soundtrack that you would murder your family to. They're very kind of like sensitive, it's a playlist. It's simply a playlist, and that they spun to, because this was such a media sensation during that time. When they showcased this idea that David had a murder playlist, which is absolutely a complete lie, we see that there's this text file open. Now, the file is called Myth, and Myth, because David's laptop and hard drives were submitted under what they called the black light report, and they included that in the FOIA request. So we saw all the things David was researching, when the computers are accessed, when they're not. And we know that Myth was created months beforehand. And we knew that its contents were erased. And if you look what it says there, it says, "I have loved you all with all of my heart." So they said that David killed Kamel, killed Rania, came over here, deleted the contents of what Myth was, wrote, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," went back into the living room and killed himself.
And did the Allah Akbar thing.
Oh yeah, and did the Allah Akbar thing, of course. Uh, but if you look at where some of the blood is found, like we see on the notepad, why is David going into the office just to leave a little bit of blood on the notepad? It doesn't make any sense. Until you see, like, wait a minute, is this thing staged? Did somebody come in here and write this? Because if David kept a journal, it's called a day one journal, and he was pretty adamant about writing in this journal, and he was quite the poet. He's fascinating to read his work.
Hmm.
But there's almost seems to be some type of misspeak here. I have loved you all with all of my heart. That, first of all, that don't sound like David. And when you say I've loved the both of you, like, to come here to leave this evidence, it doesn't sound like David. It doesn't seem like something he would do. Obviously, him murdering his wife and child doesn't seem like something he would do. They really make him out to be this, like, loony conspiracy theorists. So this was very interesting. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. This computer was accessed on the 14th of January. The bodies were found on the 17th of January. And we saw the advanced state, the marked autolysis, the advanced state of mummification that the bodies were found in, because it'd been weeks. Police agree. They believe David and his family died on Christmas Day. I believe they died on Christmas Day, simply based off of certain things like the trash, the mail, and his internet and computer activity. But we know the root of this computer was accessed at 5 a.m. on the 14th of January, which I find to be hella suspect. We also know that no one ever heard Paleo barking. And this dog is supposedly kept in this house for 3 weeks with no food. And no one hears the dog barking until 3 days before the bodies are found. Well, 3 days before the bodies were found would be January 14th, the same day that the root of this computer was accessed. This is the blacklight report. Okay, yeah. So we could see that the computer was accessed. When it was accessed, like, that's why they did with some things they did such a thorough investigation. But then with some other, it's just like, how do you drop the ball on some of these major items that we're bringing up? It's beyond me. And we know that some people in David's life were in and out of that house. So we know that they have a key. So is it that difficult to imagine that people were in and out of this house?
It's logical.
You know what I mean? What are they looking for? What do they want? So going back to that, why was the rear slider glass door, why was this left ajar? When the police arrive at the scene, here's the backyard. The sliding glass door was cracked open. I don't know what family does that in the middle of winter for 3 weeks. Leaves the door unlocked. And it's documented in the police reports and in the audio files. But, it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough to get these cops thinking that something else was going on here with this family. I do find it very suspicious that they have claimed, just by looking at what a fucked up crime scene this is, that they determined that David killed his family and himself within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're a part of it. Somebody in that police department is a part of this in some way. Or maybe we're dealing with more Keystone cops here but time will
Mm,
tell. And then last question is, why were the police unable to find a motive for their accusations against David Crowley when they ended their investigation in October? And on that last page, let's see, here's where they say they believe it's an apparent murder suicide.
right.
Hasn't even been 24 hours. It was immediate. Oh yeah, we also have a DNA profile that doesn't match any of David or Rania and or Kamel, and it was never determined whose DNA
Wow.
it matched. I believe this is the last page of their report in October. After review of all electronic items in their possession, Detective Brian Bone reported on October 7th, 2015, that Detective Cloconos and the DCCTF did not find any information on the related devices that showed motive or cause for what happened during or up to this incident. At least they admit it. They
Yeah.
have not a single shroud of evidence, not a single piece of evidence that ties David to this crime. Despite missing body parts, despite a very bizarre crime scene, if there was blood all over that house, if there was a mist of blood and uh, 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 patterns, then this is typical things that we want to see at a crime scene. We have a 5'11" guy standing there with no right hand, but let's just say he has his right hand at this time, shoots himself facing away from his family, yet spins around this way,
Mm-hmm.
sprawled out like this. The gun is now on the left side. His head's missing, his hand's missing, and all this blood that was pooled on that recliner, which was never tested, proves that these bodies were moved. Like I said, just having some of these items under the blue blanket, having David's right
Yeah.
foot under Kamel's cardigan and the other one under the blanket. How can that be if David died last? But some of this evidence is pointing to that David died first. I believe this was David. David's lying here. We pull up David's shirt. David was wearing multiple shirts that day. Where's all the blood? The blood is coming down. Look at this pattern here to the side. It looks like David's on his side.
Mm.
That's the only way you're going to get this. Look at the blood, how it's soaked here on the left side. And then look at this. Look, how do you get this going on?
Wow.
Where does this come from? David is lying here, sprawled out, just like Jesus. Okay? But all the blood is suggesting that the blood is coming down. If David died the way the medical examiner and the police say, this area right
Yeah.
here, this is where all of our blood would be. But there's no blood here. Where do we see blood? We see the blood's coming out this way. Look, boom,
Yeah.
right here, coming out. But yet we don't see any large pools of blood here in this area. And then, of course, like as I mentioned, we have that dragging motion coming this way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these items would be blocking the recliner. But
I was gonna say, is that the same recliner that has the blood?
This is the recliner I'm talking about.
Oh,
And the
wow.
large pool, you can see it a little bit. There's a large pool of blood right here. Most of the blood is probably found right here. Yet David, his head would be here. You know, the head that is not at the crime scene anymore. But this is how David was lying, with this arm stretched out this way, stretched out like that. So, and then they say these are his footprints, which they look like a child's feet.
Hmm.
But how can we know? Because they didn't test it. They didn't test the latent prints. They didn't confirm that David had blood on his feet. They just said simply because he was barefoot. This blood spatter is it just I get the feeling like their heads were covered. I don't know. I get this eerie feeling like they knew who killed them. That's what I think. I think they knew who killed them. And there's so much more. These are just to kind of dip your toes into this investigation, and your audience can go and hear all the speeches that he gave. You tell me if this guy is crazy or if he's a
Yeah.
genius, because he's talking about all the things I'm talking about. So don't let them ever say that I'm some loony. I mean, you heard it here
Yeah.
first. This is one of our brothers here, like,
Yeah.
and the whole truth, this whole supposed truth community came from this time frame. We Are Change, Oath
Man.
Keepers. It all stems from around this time, from this big truth movement.
I just wanted to close this one with just thanking you for coming on and clarifying
Thanks for having
as
me,
much as
man.
that as anybody could ask for, especially without doing any research yourself. You just had it all laid out there for you. So I hope people appreciate that aspect, that element of the work that you do, that you want to sit down and watch something and learn everything about it without having to do any Googling or go to a library or anything like that.
Right.
That's what you
And that's just
did.
a handful of questions. There's so many more, and there's so much more I want to talk about. And but I think as far as a preliminary or getting your audience accustomed to this case that I'm working on, I'm hoping that that's my reward for Act 2 or Act 1 through Act 3 is I'll show you what happened on January 6th if you guys will connect me with some lawyers or attorneys that can help me get this case reopened.
So definitely give your support, whatever you have, you know, to his Give Send Go. You also have everything else you said, Venmo, PayPal, all that stuff.
Yeah, I believe it's Wooz News, like $ Wooz News, or if it's Venmo or PayPal or whatever, it'll be Wooz News at protonmail.com.
Excellent.
So
That's
anyway,
it.
thank you, Lens. God bless you, sir.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
out. Peace.
Have a good one.
Last night I dreamt about how things were.
Of every enemy of the state.
And then I woke up here.